Greetings, brothers and sisters. JoJo Magoo had a press conference. I haven't seen it yet. I know he has a couple of gaffes. I've seen headlines. Somebody sent me a short clip of him having a gaffe. I'll get to that in just a moment. And I'm going to cover that. It starts off with a storm, but it ends up being the Desert Storm, or the whatever the Afghanistan war was called. Desert Storm was before. We'll come back to that. But first, I want to start off here. John Oliver slams radical panic goblins Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham for Afghanistan refugee stance. This is from Yahoo News.
Over the next decade, that number may swell to the millions. So first we invade, and then we're invaded.
The lesson of this 20-year war cannot be that every time we turn a country upside down or make huge mistakes, our immigration laws, our refugee laws no longer apply.
First, off, you tag team racial panic goblins. Second, the notion of every time we turn a country upside down is an incredible thing to just blow past. Maybe that's the lesson here, Laura. Maybe don't keep turning countries upside down in the first place.
And so I just want to do a little introduction with that lead in. With this thing I was talking about at the end of the video yesterday. It's a really important point. I think everybody should, especially if you consider yourself a person looking for truth, a truth seeker, that you understand the idea of people's personal bias, confirmation bias. I coined a term, or I tried to coin a term. Was it something to do with deception? I was talking about, I don't know if somebody remembers this. I looked it up, but I couldn't find it in the title of a video. But it was about how there was confirmation bias, and then there was something else, deception, self-deception, something, purposely deceiving oneself. So I can't remember that. I thought I was going to talk about that more. I forgot the term. Confirmation bias is looking for things that support your inner belief system, that agree with you, what you believe inside, and tell you you're right. And viewing things, a deceptive lens. I was talking about how people have a warped lens. It's something that everyone has to work towards not having. We all have our personal prejudices, and we all have our, groups and demographics we identify with. And just being an American is that. Like, all of us have that to one extent to another. Growing up as an American, you see, my wife and I were watching the movie Lagan. It's one of the better Indian movies, Bollywood movies. And I know this from traveling. Like you see with the Afghani troops doing jumping jacks. There's a difference there, right? The people in other countries are much different, and their way that they perceive reality is different, just based in their culture. And I don't know how much of it has to do with, genetics as much as culture. But you see this with immigrants. Many immigrants come in and they live in a neighborhood where there's other Italians, there's other Irish, there's other Indian people or Mexican people or whatever it is, right? And they try to keep their old world culture. And so they'll have restaurants of food that's familiar to them, and they'll have, their houses are decorated, and, there'll be people who cater to international markets for foods and things. And they try to retain their ethnic identity from the country they moved from, because they came to America because of opportunity, but they didn't want to leave their old world culture behind. I had a friend I used to work with, and her grandmother was Italian. I think on one side she was Polish, and one side she was Italian. And her grandmother said, I'm Italian, your mom's, Italian American, you're American Italian, and your kids will be American. And so she thought of it as 4 generations, but I think it's even more like 3, where you don't even, there's lots of people who don't even remember or really think about their ethnic identity. Like, I don't think about it. Very seldom do I think about it. And I have such a small grasp of, that from my parents. I grew up as an American. I see this there's a lot of Indian practitioners of the heartfulness system in America. And they have their Indian clubs. They live in neighborhoods where they mostly interact with other Indian people. They have sort of a social club. It's one of the problems with heartfulness in America, that it seems sort of an exclusive Indian practice, because they do very, Indian things. In fact, the ashram in Georgia, they were having more of like a social weekend there every, it's like 2 hours away from from Atlanta, and so it's a long drive, and people would come up there and they would spend the time and they would just have Indian food and do Indian things. And if you came from America, you say, hey, this isn't really for me. It's this. It was kind of a problem, and so they wanted to retain their upbringing and what was familiar to them, but their kids grow up in American schools and quickly become Americanized, and there's such a huge gap between the two cultures. Master Charji didn't want. He would sort of advised against Indian American marriages. Like if you grew up in America and you met a person from India, he said that, there's a big cultural gap there. It's hard to, overcome those differences. And so these kids who are, American kids, and the parents don't know what to do with them. They communicate in a different way. They don't understand, each other. The kids don't want anything to do with the Indian culture. Many of them don't even try heartfulness because they associate it with that. They don't like going on trips to India and things because they're, basically American kids, right? And so we all have our personal view. And so you see this thing with Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, and John Oliver, and I look at them and I'm like, none of you guys should be talking. Like, none of you guys should open your mouth about this thing, right? Because you have no business doing so, because you're shills. And, in the past or whatever, I guess Tucker Carlson has been the one who's moved the most to become a truther. Like, he's the one that I could watch and agree with a lot of what he says, or some of what he says, right? Even though he's a mainstream person, he's moved into truther land to some extent. Like, he still works for Fox, so it's going to be limited. But if you're a true truther, and there isn't very many of them, a person seeking the truth, not looking to validate your, being an outsider or whatever it is, right? Like, I have that, I don't fit in. So, part of why I was doing the truth community in the beginning was because I, wanted to be right. My whole life I knew there was something wrong with America, right? Something wrong with this culture, and I wanted to be validated, but I have been, and it's not great. Like, it, doesn't really matter. Like, so I don't care about that anymore. Like, validation is no longer, it's just a small part. Maybe once in a while I'll laugh about it or whatever. It's never a horrible thing. It's not a bad thing, but it doesn't really mean anything, especially now with what's going on. But in terms of, people in the truth community, if you're actually looking for the truth, you have to see your personal bias, not anybody else's bias. You can look at it and see your own, but you have to get rid of your own personal biases, your own personal prejudices, and just accept the truth in its cold, slap in the face type of way the truth presents itself at one point or another. Reality as it is. Reality at dawn is in the heartfulness system. Very few people want to understand reality. And so Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, being from the right wing, were all for these wars. And I don't know about Tucker Carlson. I'm sure Laura Ingraham was. But I know Tucker Carlson was pushing back against various conspiracy theories. I showed you that clip where he was interviewed by Adam and the Man guy. And I've showed that clip before. But Tucker Carlson has since reversed that. He said, he came out and said, now he actually is open to those narratives about what happened in 2001. But when crap went down in 2001, all the right-wing people pushed for these wars. So all these right-wing people complain about Biden. They should just, shut the blank up, right? They just, you guys push for these wars. You don't have any business talking about this because you wanted them. You wanted payback. You went along with it. You went along with the status quo. You didn't question things that were obviously questionable, right? And so if you're a right-wing person, and now you're a truther and you're complaining about Afghanistan, you should shut the F up too, right? Because you were, you didn't see the truth back then. You didn't even, have an inkling of it. It took you years. Like, if you're just now sort of waking up, well, again, just like I said with the QBs, just sit back, and go through some process to understand, because you go through various things, right? You go through, the various levels of this thing. And the level that I'm, one of the levels that I'm like now on is just I'm tired of all the lies and all the BS and all the, the subjectivity of this thing. John Oliver was talking about, that we need to take in these refugees. And he is a foreign person. He comes from England. He's not funny, but he's a comedian. I mean, whatever he was funny on The Daily Show, he's lost that at his HBO show because he just does news pieces, and he's not a trained journalist, and that doesn't matter. But he's not professional journalist. He's from a foreign country. It's all left wing drivel, right? It's all Hollywood morality and all these things, and so he has no business. Like, he's not from this country, and he's not going to be affected. He's a millionaire, unless he goes like Brett Butler, He's not going to be affected by having a lot of immigrants from a country who are refugees, right? He's not going to be affected by that. He's not going to be, there's people who will be affected. There's poor people, people battling for jobs, people battling for resources in America already. And they're the ones who are going to be affected when you bring in a bunch of Afghanistan people, refugees from another country. A country that we effed up. We are responsible in some way. We're responsible to those people, but we're also responsible to the people in Libya. And John Oliver didn't have a problem with that war because it was Obama. Like, John Oliver didn't do a hit piece on Obama for destroying Libya and Gaddafi. Gaddafi was a good leader for his people. His people liked him. He was doing good things. He took the country from the poorest country in Africa when he took over to the richest country in Africa. So for him, for his people, he was doing a good job. There was no reason to get rid of him. The UN and, in terms of, like, he wasn't abusing his people like they said. He wasn't, being a bad leader. There's no reason to take Gaddafi out for, the reasons that they said. They lied about it. Obama lied. Biden lied. Hillary Clinton lied. And John Oliver didn't have a problem with that. And again, he could say, all right, well, let's take in these Libyan refugees, and he's still going to be at his, mansion and, wherever it is, California or wherever it is, he lives. And it's not going to affect him. And so the reality is, which I've said over and over again, that's why I don't get upset by these things, because it's a rigged, unfair system. And it hurts all of us. It hurts the poor people, but it hurts the rich people, maybe even more, at least spiritually. And rich people live with a lot of, people have to deceive themselves to, they have to turn a blind eye and just create a hardness, like a complete, rejection of reality, not to think about why we live so much better than people in other countries. Why when we go to Walmart, we turn over, an article of clothing and look where it's made. It's, Guatemala or Indonesia or India or Pakistan or China, right? Probably around, I don't know what percentage of it is. I don't know if they keep track, but probably like 70% of everything you buy at Walmart comes from a foreign country, including food, other people's food. You think they're growing enough food for America and themselves, right? That they have tons of food in their country? It's not how colonialism works. They have some food, but the majority of their food is getting exported because of the differential in the currencies, how currencies are valued. That's your American privilege. That's my American privilege. Our currency is valued more, just like European currencies are valued more. And so we're on the demand end of things. Their currencies have less value, and so they're on the supply end. We have their resources and their labor. They're in sweatshops. We're in cul-de-sacs, and that's because of the currency, the way the economies are structured, the world economies. We're the haves, and they're the have-nots. And this creates a problem. Like, this creates, an unfairness in the world that we benefit from, every one of us. And we can complain about Trump, or we can complain about Biden, we can complain about Obama or Bush or any of these leaders or the Hollywood celebrities or all these things, but we're in a rigged system that's rigged in our favor. So we're part of it, right? And they have to launch these illegal wars because the economy is so upside down and dead and so messed up. They have to do things like that. We have a military industrial complex that is responsible for the majority of the American economy and keeping America as the number one country. And so that has to be fed. It has to be fed other countries that can't fight back on one level or another, selling them weapons or invading them or changing their leadership or whatever it is. This has to be done. You have a bunch of unhappy people who are, like I said, in sweatshops or worse or whatever, some sort of modern day slavery, and they are unhappy about the way the world economy is structured, and they're living it for reals, where we're deceiving ourselves, oblivious to where our stuff comes from. And people are so fake in America because people don't want to, feel guilty or sad or, not enjoy their stuff because they don't want to know, right? They don't want to know. And so they go along with stuff that the leadership tells them, and, the fake, whatever, the psychological operations, these BS things that get us into these wars, get us to, agree to something based in lies. Like when Colin Powell said, went to the UN and claimed, based in Dick Cheney setting him up, right, and his crew of neocons, and saying that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Turned out he didn't. They lied. They lied us into war. Just like the media went along with it. Just like with Afghanistan, they're not even getting to that, big lie that got us into those other wars. And so the same thing happened with Gaddafi. I saw him lying us into war. And I was very upset about it. We went to war in Libya. But part of me understood, and a lot of you haven't gotten here yet, that if we didn't go to war in Libya, if we didn't take out Gaddafi, and he was successful in selling oil for the gold dinar, a gold coin, right? Selling oil for gold, it would destroy the petrodollar, or at least, wound it. And that would create economic catastrophes, certainly here in America, but globally. Because evil, the system runs off evil, right? In some ways, there's always some evil there because it's not a godly system. It's not a divine system. And we're all 100% dependent on this system. And so they're doing our evil bidding, Obama was, and Biden, all these people, by getting rid of Gaddafi, which was an evil act and a lie, the UN, right? France was, heavily involved, and then some other countries. And these illegal wars, and John Oliver, he's somebody who works for the beast. And he's like, yeah, shouldn't we look back at those wars and not do that anymore? Yeah, but they're going to have to do something to keep the beast going. And John Oliver is a beastly person, even probably more so than certainly Tucker Carlson and maybe even Laura Ingraham, who are also, part of the beast, right? People who are really wealthy, working for really wealthy corporations and shilling, right? Tucker Carlson is, flirting with the truth to some extent. But, there's so many truthers who, use outrage and fear and, they're like, oh, this is horrible, but don't really say what I'm saying here. That this system, can't survive our economic system without doing shit like this, like whatever it is. And there's evil stuff going on all the time, and people are suffering, and the globe is suffering, animals are suffering, the planet's suffering, to keep this demonic system going. But very few of us really want to live without this demonic system because we're 100% dependent on it. And that's our, problem that everyone has to face, like our responsibility in it. Like, I don't want to see the system collapse, and I know probably more than most people, a lot more than most people, how evil the system is and how bad it is, and how, and I'm doing the heartfulness meditation that says that this system has to go. It does, the heartfulness meditation doesn't really, talk about these teachings very much, but there's some of the fundamental teachings written by the books by Sri Ramchandra Babaji. He is the second master of the system. And he wrote these 5 books, and he said that the new civilization is one based in spirituality, based in people's internalized relationship to God, is, the new way that's going to overtake this old system. But first, this system is going to collapse in epic fashion, and bring the world down and people down to a fearful, like almost like a punishment of the consequences of this current system, where the world will be almost uninhabitable, difficult to live in. And then we'll finally look inside and say, oh, we got to do better. Like, people will be so miserable and life will be so sucky that people will finally, be forced to make the choice to connect to God internally and do it right? And just have such a, anger towards their previous existences, because we all are going to be, a part of that, right? Our mistakes we're making now are going to cost future versions of ourselves. I talked about that, in a humorous way, how like sometimes Tuesday Paul screws over Thursday Paul, right? So sometimes you screw yourself over. You're screwing your future self over today, right? I mean, we all are doing that to a certain extent on a spiritual level. And so that's reality, that we keep on, going in the wrong direction, and there's going to be a price that has to be paid. And the price is, difficult lifestyle and things, because people won't embrace their higher nature, won't embrace their soul, embrace their, their soul's orientation and their soul's goal and path for them, and God's path for them. Everyone is living in an egotistical way, and that's, being a demon or going on a demonic path. Your ego is a potential demon, and your soul is a potential saint, right? In terms of embracing one path or the other. And most people, are disconnected from their souls and are living ego-driven existences based in their egotistical preferences. And that is, which are met and satisfied or taken care of by the beastly system. A slave to our wishes, right? That's one of the lines, the second line from the Heartfulness Prayer. We are yet but slaves of wishes, putting bar to our advancement. And so even though I'm aware of all these things, and I know the system is, evil, and I see it more and more, it's going in the wrong direction, away from God, I still, this is going to suck when it crashes, even though its crashing would sort of validate me in this YouTube channel. Its destruction, the apocalaughs, validates me as a person. I'm not psyched about it crashing. I would, rather be wrong, but I'm not. So let's go here to JoJo Magoo. I really haven't watched this. One person sent me there's this gaffe that he starts off with.
Recover. I can't think of anyone better to lead this operation than Deanne Criswell of FEMA. She's.
So this is, when this was sent to me, they always try to make it worse. Like right-wing people that are pulling out JoJo's gaffes, they always try to embellish it somehow. They'll make his face bigger. They'll just do things to make it seem worse than it is. And it's bad enough. Like the guy's he's not there mentally. He forgets things all the time. And he babbles and but it's not enough to get the mainstream media and his supporters to say he's not mentally competent to do his job. And so that's just, something we're going to have to live with. But you can see there, he can't remember names, and his energy gets real low. He just, he just gets real quiet, and, we watch it again.
I can't think of anyone better to lead this operation than Deanne Criswell of.
And Criswell, so he just gets low energy. And so I'm not going to go through all of this. I just can't listen to him talk about the storm in Afghanistan, so we'll go right to the questions.
The fact is that more and more of the groups we urgently want to get out of Afghanistan, starting with American citizens and the folks who worked in the embassies and personnel with our allies, as well as the Afghans who helped them and worked in those embassies, as well as those who helped them on the battlefield as well. We are working diligently to make sure we've increased the ability to get them out. We've They've changed the gate operations and a whole range of things. And
They're changing the gate operations. That's going to make a big difference. Like, whole range of things. We're changing the way we open the gate. It used to open up sideways, but now we're going to open it up from the top down.
and that's why we've been able to significantly increase the number of people we're getting out.
And will the Taliban agree to an extension past August 31st? Have you discussed that with them?
We've discussed a lot with the Taliban. They've been cooperative in extending some of the perimeter. That remains to be seen whether we ask that question. Ed, fire away.
Yes,
I want
Mr.
you
President.
jumping
Actually,
over that.
following up on Andrew's question, because the United States is now negotiating with the Taliban over airport access and such, do you now trust them? And then a question on the public response. A new poll out today shows America.
Why is he laughing? Like, you know, he laughs at some of these questions in an arrogant, kind of dickish way. I mean, this is JoJo Magoo. Like, JoJo Magoo suffered a lot of tragedy. His wife and daughter died, young daughter, like a 2-year-old or something like that, died in a car accident. And then he was left alone with 2 sons, one of which is Hunter, right? Who's been a complete nightmare. And so he's had these various types of, you know, tragedies that he talks about and uses as a way to sell himself and be a campaign person. But did it make him have a good heart? Some people live tough lives and have a lot of trauma, become saintly and have good hearts and are loving people. He's not one of them. You don't feel a lot of loving energy or heart energy. There's an arrogance there. And he's so mentally incompetent, and people are like laughing at him, even his own staff, and they have to manage him. And then he has these laughs like he's, you know, like he's a knower, right? Just watch that again.
The Taliban over airport access and such, do you now trust them? And then a question on the public response. A new poll out today shows Americans wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan, but they disapprove of the way you've handled it. Poll also found that based in part on what's transpired in the last week, a majority of Americans, and forgive me, I'm just the messenger, no longer consider you to be competent, focused, or effective in the job.
I haven't seen that poll.
It's out there from CBS this morning.
No, it's not. You just lied. You're a liar. This is stuff that Trump used to do, right? When he would, you know, call people fake news. JoJo Magoo does it.
What would you say to those Americans who no longer...
Another laugh, right? That's a laugh of just complete anger and spite and, you know.
believe that you're up
Look.
to the job?
I had a basic decision to make. I either withdraw America from a 20-year war that, depending on whose analysis you accept, cost us $150 million a day for 20 years or $300 million a day for 20 years.
Which is a missing $1 trillion, which I've talked about. He's doubling down on this. That there is a missing $1 trillion. Like, you, depending on whose analysis, all right, well, let's see the second analysis that costs $2 trillion. So, you know, when they're presenting this to the American people, why not get the most realistic? I mean, you don't have accountants. Like, you don't got people who are in charge of making sure we know exactly how much money this war cost. I mean, I talked about this in this other video. Well, it could be, you know, it's $1 trillion either way. I don't know.
Who, and I carry this card to me every day, and who, in fact, where we lost 2,448 Americans dead and 20,722 wounded. Either increase the number of forces.
You have a card in that? You're keeping a card in your breast pocket that shows you how many soldiers died and are wounded? You know, you're carrying that around with you now? Like, that's your defense?
We keep there and keep that going. All right, end the war. And I decided to end the war. As I said the other day, you know, the only reason we're in Afghanistan is this is the place from which bin Laden attacked the United States of America. Had this been in another Middle Eastern country where he could have easily have moved from, we would have never gone to Afghanistan. So the question is, when is the right time to leave? What are our national interests? Where do they lie? And the idea that we are in a situation where we can not recognize that terrorism has metastasized around the world and the need for us to focus on other parts of the
So this is just his set answer. He's going to give this answer forever. You know, it's, like his stump speech. And this is the way they're going to deal with this. Whatever happens here, he made the right decision because it was time to end the war, regardless of a lack of planning or a lack of whatever it is, right?
world, which created an even greater danger of an al-Qaeda-like operation beginning. Can't be ignored. And we are, as you well know, because you follow this, we are a number of places where we're doing that without permanent basing American forces there. So I think when this is over, the American people have a clear understanding of what I did, why we did it, and but look, that's the job, my job.
No, they don't. Like, this is, you're like, it's not a clear understanding. You've said this over and over again, and what do you think? We don't understand what your point of view is? That this thing happened in 2001, and you guys told us that it came from someplace in Afghanistan by the Pakistan border, and it was these guys that used to be American assets that fought the Russians in the Russian-Afghanistan war, but now they're, American haters, and they perpetrated this crime, and somehow we had to launch 7 wars in 5 years. That was the Pentagon plan originally put out there. Wes Clark talked about it. I showed that in another video. But we had basically 5 wars in so many years, now 20 years, in military action and arming the world and all these things. And it was a big payout for the military-industrial complex. It cost millions of lives worldwide in these various countries, destroyed people's lives, destroyed their infrastructure, and really didn't, equal what happened here in America. And so, yeah, we understand what you're saying. We don't believe you, right? Many of us.
My job is to make judgments. My job is to make judgments no one else can or will make. I made them. I'm convinced I'm absolutely correct in not deciding to send more young women and men to war for a war that, in fact, is no longer warranted.
On the question of the Taliban, though, do you trust them now that you have to negotiate with them?
I don't trust anybody, including you. I love you, but there's not a lot of people I trust.
Whoa. He loves you, but he doesn't trust you. Random reporter guy who just asked him a tough question, and then he blinks. There's a lot of people he doesn't trust, where you have to trust the Taliban. That's the position we're in right now. You've got to trust that the Taliban are smart enough not to do something that's going to create a longer where you guys are going to have to retaliate. And so the Taliban's best interest to get Americans out of there, and, they seem to want that, and that's the only thing that you can trust. But you can't trust random people in Afghanistan who might be mad at Americans, and there's many of them, and who knows what's going to happen here, right? And if there's any kind of a debacle here, hostage-wise or anything else, it's going to come back that you failed in terms of your planning, which has nothing to do with, like, ending the war should have happened years ago. I agree with that, and I knew it was going to be a mess, because it always is. But, you're not a hero. You voted for this war, and you were vice president of this war, and you went along with all these things. And now you're stuck with the bill, paying the bill.
Look, the Taliban has Taliban has to make a fundamental decision. Is the Taliban going to attempt to...
Every time I hear the word Taliban, or pretty much every time, I think to myself, or triggers that song in my head, right? Hey, Mr. Taliban, tally me banana. And what is it? Daylight come and JoJo want to go home, right? JoJo, he wants to go home, right? And so, the Taliban, sometimes there's a leader, right? Sometimes a group has a leader, and sometimes they're just the Taliban. They're just a group. And some, they talk about them like it's some group consciousness. And so JoJo doesn't trust the Taliban to tally his banana, but he certainly wants to go home.
Be able to unite and provide for the well-being of the people of Afghanistan, which no one group has ever done since before, dealing for hundreds of years. And if it does, it's going to need everything from additional help in terms of economic assistance, trade, and a whole range of things. The Taliban has said, we'll see whether they mean it or not. They're seeking legitimacy. They're seeking legitimacy to determine whether or not they will be recognized by other countries. They have told other countries as well as us they don't want us to move our diplomatic presence completely. But so all this is all just talk now.
It's just talk. It's a bunch of talk.
All just talk now. And so far, the Taliban has not taken action against U.S. forces. So far, they have, by and large, followed through on what they said in terms of allowing Americans to pass through and the like. And I'm sure they don't control all of their forces. It's a ragtag force.
It's ragtag over there.
And so we'll see. We'll see whether or not what they say turns out to be true. But the bottom line is this, folks. Look.
What he just said there is important because the ragtag forces is how you defeat America. You just keep alive. That's all you have to do. I mean, in terms of American citizens, when the government turns on us, which it's in the process of doing, this is happening right now. The government's turning on all of us. When that happens, that's what you have to do. You just have to outlast them, right? When you're dealing with a superior military force that's, messing with you on your, home turf or whatever, right? They're coming into your home, your towns, and they're messing with you, which is happening to us. The federal government, Washington, D.C., is imposing all kinds of things on the rest of us that we don't like. Some of us don't like, right? Right now it's happening. It happens all the time. Federal laws that are not generated from the communities and towns that you live in, a government that doesn't represent your views, a federal government that doesn't represent your views, people from California, Hollywood, celebrities, New York, these places that are, very, very liberal-centric, who are voting and telling you how to run your lives. They're very conservative people. In the past, Reagan, these other types of people, are messing with your lives and telling you how to live on a local basis. And you just have to endure it. And this is how you win. The blueprint's there. Because they're trying to force you to do something from a distance. And, they're not good people. They don't have the backing of God. Like he was saying that stuff about God, right? Joe Biden said earlier, I'll go back to that. He was talking about God. We'll go back to that. We must probably say it here maybe at the end as well.
At the end of the day, if we didn't leave Afghanistan now, when do we leave? Another 10 years? Another 5 years? Another year? I'm not about to send your son or your daughter to fight in Afghanistan.
It isn't about leaving. They already said that. The guy asked a question earlier. It isn't about people want to leave Afghanistan. Nobody wants to stay there. Very few people want to stay there. Some people want a small force to be left there, 2,500 troops or something to run whatever operations. I mean, that's some right-wing talking point. But in terms of the majority of people, they don't want to spend more money there. They don't even know why we're there at this point. And so the issue isn't leaving, JoJo. It's how you handled it, right? Which is you're never going to admit that you're a screw-up, and you don't even know. Like, you don't even know you're a screw-up, and you don't even know that they're rolling you. Like, your handlers and your advisors aren't taking care of you, and they've sold you out here.
We don't see where that is in our overwhelming interest. And the talk about how our interests are going to be impacted, let me tell you, you're sitting in Beijing or you're sitting in Moscow. Are you happy we left? They
Another joker laugh.
love nothing better for us to continue to be bogged down there, totally occupied with what's going on. So the idea, I think that history is going to record. This was the logical, rational, and right decision to make. So thank you all so very much.
So they have to keep it stupid and simple for Magoo. Like his major talking point here is we had to leave. Waste of money, all these things, right? You heard it. And it's not about leaving or not. Like I said, it's about how. Like how could have it been more efficient, and then why? Why were we in there in the first place? And this is going back to the beginning of the press conference. I covered this earlier, but my microphone was off. That's why I referenced it. Sometimes that happens. So I want to go back and talk about this because he says something here that's basically blasphemous.
Journalist. What we are doing is extraordinary. And you have to
Extraordinary? Not extraordinary, JoJo.
think of all they're doing. Thanks to the people who from all over the world who are helping this effort. Just want to thank you, and I'll keep you informed every day as we move forward. May God protect our troops and our diplomats and who are serving in harm's way.
Why would God do that? Like, why would you think God would do that? So the American military is so superior. Like, it's something like under 6,000 troops were lost in Iraq, right? And 1 million Iraqis died. And so you think about the disparity between the loss of human life in an American war. It's not even a contest between the amount of American troops that are lost compared to, the opposing troops. It's like 20 to 1 or 50 to 1 or even more. And then just, everybody else in terms of, civilians and things. And so the American military force has all this superior technology and training. No army can match America. You need God also. You're going into these countries illegally, immorally, based in lies, based in, whatever operations that you put together to force these wars. And you need God also. He often says, God, watch over our troops. Well, not if you're doing things that are evil. I mean, why would God watch over your troops? Any country. Like, why would you expect that to happen? Maybe individuals who have something to offer later on, who are going to become spiritual, someone like my brother, whatever. People who, people who are going to, find their way later in life. They have to be taken care of during war. I mean, not so much God, but these higher developed souls that monitor and do God's work here on this planet. But in terms of America, like we have the advantage of the world's reserve currency. We have, all these ways that the system's rigged in our favor, and you want God on your side too. He's not a godly person. You don't feel any godly energy or really somebody who's connected to God in any way coming from JoJo Magoo's. Everybody has godly energy in them, but there's lots of people they're so disconnected from their hearts. Like they don't really feel love. They don't really feel anything in their hearts. They're just gut or mind people. A lot of people are just, ghoulish, walking around zombie-ish, totally disconnected. Like when you see these fake MNFers on the news and these celebrities, and they're acting all the time, they're pretending all the time, and they're not being genuine or sincere. They're not being authentic. Everyone's got to stop faking it, right? And the cancel culture and the censorship and everything that's going on is making people more and more fake, as is social media and these filters, right? People misrepresenting how they look and what they, what they like and who they are, all these Instagram and all these different accounts and things, different social media platforms, and people are representing themselves as something that they're not, something they'd like to be or something they're pretending to be. And so, that has to stop. I wanted to conclude this video with something I left out of the introduction. I thought about it. The ideas came to me last night. There was like this free flow of stuff, and, ideas come to me, and then I forgot about them this morning, which often happens. And it was going to be the title of this video. Hopefully I'll do it again. I'll say this again because it needs to be said more than once. Some of these things I just forget about and never come back to, and they need to be repeated for a lot of reasons. But the idea is here that everyone's a crackhead. And what I mean by that is when you look at a crackhead or an alcoholic, somebody, a gambling addict or someone who has out of control anger issues, abusive tendencies that dominate their existence, some sort of compulsive like behavior that you know is going to bring them down. Their addiction is going to wreck their relationship with their family. It's going to make them lose their job. They're going to choose their addiction over their job, over their family, over their physical health. And eventually, like you see with meth addicts, or, you know, you look at these people, if you go back, if you Google like meth addicts or crack addicts and, you know, before and after pictures, and sometimes they'll post multiple pictures, like a series of mug shots of a meth head. And, you know, when they start and they look fairly normal, then what they look at the end, some Gollum-like hag, right? And that meth has just completely eroded away their life force and their bodies and all these things. And so you understand that when you see severe cases of addiction. Maybe you know somebody like that, or you just know of it. That people who have severe addictions, severe compulsive behavior, mental illness, and they just can't help themselves. Or you can take a lighter example of this, like, you know, on Seinfeld. The Seinfeld narcissism of all the different characters prevented them from having significant relationships and getting married and growing up, right? Because they always, you know, they have these compulsions of freedom and immaturity and, you know, whatever it was, right? You know, superficial happiness. So they would never commit to anything. They would never, you know, be responsible for anything. And you see this with people, you know, that everyone has this in America, not just America, the whole world, where people have things that they don't really recognize, desire-based type of behaviors and cravings and impulsivity, whatever it is, that people have inside themselves, and it's self-destructive, and it keeps people from going on their soul's path and becoming what they're supposed to become. I mean, this is across the board. We live in a desire-based world, a desire-based economy, and it affects everybody in this way, where it blocks people from doing what they're supposed to do and forming, you know, it's a self-sabotaging type of things within people's internal world, compulsions, and, I mean, what it really is impressions, attachments, right? People are attached to things in a way that's not healthy. These are some scaras, what's called some scaras in the heartfulness system. I've seen it, you know, I've seen it everywhere. But particularly I see it with people who want to have a relationship with God, but just can't get over their attachments. And it could be to their culture, their religion, their upbringing, whatever it might be, things that are, you know, blocking their way. I mean, there's people in the heartfulness system who are still, you know, they grew up in India, and even though the heartfulness system doesn't have any of these rituals, these Indian rituals in it, they're still doing these rituals and not doing the practice. And it's stopping them from moving along spiritually, their personal prejudices, things that are, you know, they're just not able to rise up to something that they love and believe in and have faith in, but not real faith, right? Only partial faith. They still have their superstitions. I mean, people have all these superstitions and things that prevent them from moving forward. So I want to cover this, and my voice is going here, so I want to end this here. And I also want to talk about this idea that, you know, I've seen this, doing this for a while, there's things that upset people. There's one big thing that's upsetting people now, not Afghanistan, but something else, right? The, you know, stuff to do with COVID. And that's a central issue that people have. But it's always something, and there'll be something else later on. You know, I've seen this come and go. The powers that be are, you know, they'll get as much as they can out of an issue. They'll push for as much of a power grab, you know, as they can get, and the people will resist it as best they can, and, you know, with their limited power. And then you just move on, and it's just something else later on. But this is just symptoms of a dying system, right? And so, you know, what has to happen is a deeper connection to God. I say it all the time. It's a simple answer, but very few people can do it because of the, you know, these attachments and things that people have. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely important from the Apocalaughs, and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.